welcome back to another video. Today, I want to speak about something that I absolutely adore, 1960s makeup. Because as much as fashion and music and basically everything went through a revolution in the 1960s, so did makeup. I feel like one of the biggest factors that make a 1960s look is the 1960s makeup. The cut creases, the twiggy lashes, all of that. And today I just wanted to share the history with you of how this makeup look came to be, why it was so popular, the brands that played such a huge role in popularizing it, the products that were used, and just everything else that played a role into creating the wonderful 1960s makeup look. So sit back, get yourself a drink, relax, and let me explain 1960s makeup to you, drawn with eyeshadow and written with lipstick. There's something about 1960s makeup that feels like stepping into a dream painted in pastel and black ink. A world where lashes stretch like starbursts and lids gleam in baby blue and lavender frost. Before the gloss and glitter of later decades, the 60s gave us a new face, not just by cosmetics, but in culture. This was the decade when girls drew their lashes on by hand, when eyes became emblems of rebellion, and when beauty slipped from the pages of etiquette manuals into the hands of teenage dreamers. The 1960s didn't arrive gently. They burst through the powdered calm of the 1950s like eyeliner across a bare lid, sudden, expressive, and ready to draw new lines. Bold new looks didn't just appear, they erupted, inspired by rebellion, rock and roll, and a hunger for change. Vanities from London to Los Angeles filled with pastel shadows and pot gloss, and suddenly a girl could draw her own identity in eyeliner. Twiggy's lashes, Edie's smoked out stare, Dusty's powder blue lids, each one a spell cast in mascara and pan stick, each one a mirror of the moment. This is the year of the eye. The orb and its surroundings are getting more attention than the knee, the waist, or the bosom. And this has produced a whole new fashion art form, wrote Pablo, makeup artist for Elizabeth Arden in 1965. So follow me into a world of pot gloss and pan stick, of lashes both glued and drawn, of eyes that didn't just see but spoke. This is the story of 1960s makeup, imaginative and unlike anything that came before. Chapter 1, Beauty Before the 60s, a focus on the face. To understand the new 1960s makeup look and why it was so revolutionary, it is important to take a step back and take a look at the beauty landscape of the 1940s and 50s. In the decades before the 1960s, makeup styles were far more conservative and centered around polished, feminine ideals, influenced by Hollywood glamour. The face of classic 1940s and 50s beauty was characterized by a flawless, matte complexion, strong lips, and softly defined eyes. In fact, by the post-war era, beauty magazines declared a face is all mouth. The lips were the focal point of the look. Women routinely wore bold lipsticks, especially shades of red, as the standout feature of their makeup, while eye makeup played more of a supporting role. In the 1950s, style icons like Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly, and Audrey Hepburn set the beauty standard. Marilyn's look, winged black eyeliner paired with her signature red lips, became especially influential. The typical 1950s makeup formula included powdery foundation, rouge on the cheeks, minimal eyeshadow, often just a neutral tone, a neat swipe of eyeliner, and mascara, all finished with a vibrant lipstick. This formula created the elegant, ladylike looks seen on silver screen stars and in women's magazines. The emphasis was on looking groomed and put together, with limited colors available. Most lipsticks were variations of red, pink, or coral, and eyeshadow tended to be subtle pastels that matched one's outfit or eye color. As designer Mary Quant later recalled of the time, quote, "Nobody had considered a color other than red, pink, or vaguely orange for lipstick, or that there was a color other than blue and green and possibly purple for eyeshadow. So there was no flexibility and no fun with makeup." Not only were color choices narrow, but social attitudes toward makeup were quite strict. Young women of the 1950s followed their mother's guidance and wore what was considered proper makeup. The goal was to enhance one's beauty without venturing into anything too bold or too unnatural. Wearing very dramatic or creative makeup outside of movie sets was generally frowned upon. One contemporary writer noted that older generations felt eye makeup should not be theatrical or do anything besides highlighting its wearer's natural beauty. In practice, this meant most women stuck to well-behaved makeup styles. These mostly consisted of neatly lined eyes, if any eyeliner at all was worn, defined but not overly thick brows, and of course, lips were the one thing allowed to make a statement, but only a tasteful one. However, by the end of the 1950s, winds of change were blowing through fashion and culture. While an elegant, classic look still reigned, think of Jackie Kennedy's refined makeup in the early 60s, which really wasn't so different from 1950s style, a new generation was coming of age. These younger people were eager to break free from the structures of the past. Just as hemlines were inching upward with the advent of the miniskirt, a more youthful and experimental approach to makeup was on the horizon. The stage was set for a dramatic shift, one that would turn the focus from the lips to the eyes and redefine what beautiful could look like. Chapter 2: The Youthquake: Cultural Shifts That Inspired 1960s Makeup. By the early 1960s, cultural and social changes were radically reshaping style and self-expression. The term youthquake was famously coined during this period, and it perfectly captures how youth culture shook up the status quo in fashion and beauty. Unlike in the past, teenagers and 20-somethings now became trendsetters with growing influence. In London, the epicenter of the Swinging Sixties, young creatives, models, and designers forged a bold new aesthetic that departed from their parents' ideals. As Vogue later put it, the fresh-faced Twiggy, quote, set the youthquake of the 60s in motion, with a look that introduced the world to something entirely new. Several key factors converged to inspire the 1960s makeup revolution. So let's take a look at what made the 1960s makeup look possible. Starting, of course, with youth rebellion and music. The post-war baby boom meant that there were more teenagers and young adults than ever before, and they craved a style of their own. Rock and roll and the British invasion, with bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, provided a soundtrack of rebellion and freedom. Young women in this scene didn't want to look like prim housewives. They wanted fun, modern looks to match their new music and modern outlook on life. This meant experimenting with edgier fashion and colors, including more expressive makeup. One of the biggest contributors to the new style was swinging London and mod culture. London in the mid-1960s was a hotspot of innovation. The mod subculture, short for modernist, embraced sharp, graphic styles from tailored mini dresses and go-go boots to bobbed haircuts, and with it came a new approach to makeup. The mods celebrated beat music and futurism, and their look was deliberately youthful and eye-catching. Heavy, stylized eye makeup became a badge of the modern girl, especially in London's Carnaby Street fashion scene and Soho clubs. Designer Mary Quant, a leading figure in London's fashion, noted that by the mid-1960s, fashion had changed dramatically, but makeup had been left behind, a gap she was determined to fix by creating cosmetics that matched the daring clothes she designed. Ironically, one of the inspirations for the 1960s big eyes look came from across the channel. In the late 1950s, bohemian women in the Paris left bank's cafes began wearing what was considered the post-war European look of big eyes and a pale face. This look was often paired with turtlenecks, boots, and long straight hair. This cool and artsy look, think of Juliette Greco or the Beatnik Girls, stood in stark contrast to the curvy, red-lipped Hollywood bombshell ideal of the 1950s. British and American youth took note. As one report described teenagers, quote, born too late to be nostalgic about bright red mouths, latched onto this new look of dramatic eyes. The focus of beauty was shifting upwards from lips to eyes, and young people were leading the charge. Another big contributor was the social liberation movement. The 1960s were a time of questioning traditional roles and norms, especially for women. The burgeoning women's liberation movement encouraged women to define their identities in their own terms, whether that meant bold makeup as a form of self-expression or conversely choosing a natural look to reject social expectations. Likewise, the late 1960s hippie counterculture, which we'll discuss later, championed a more natural, earth-loving aesthetic that would influence makeup trends towards the end of the decade. Overall, there was a sense of anything goes. Women could play with their appearance more freely than before, and makeup became one more area for experimentation and personal statement. Movies and media also played a role in spreading new makeup ideas. The 1963 blockbuster film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, sparked a craze for what was coined Egyptian-inspired eye makeup. Suddenly, that ultra-thick black eyeliner with an exaggerated wing reminiscent of ancient Cleopatra was back in vogue. At the same time, fashion magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar began featuring younger models with innovative makeup. They showcased photographic editorials with creative eye makeup designs, fueling the appetite for new looks among readers. All of these influences fed into a new, growing consensus. The new look was all about the eyes. Cosmetic companies took notice as well. In the span of a few years, the market for eye makeup exploded. 10 years earlier, in the mid-1950s, eye products were a niche segment. American women spend about $7 million a year on mascara, liners, and shadows. A decade later, sales of eye-focused cosmetics had skyrocketed to $30 million annually and climbing. So what sent the figure soaring? As one journalist wrote in 1965, as with so much else these days, the teenagers. Young women were buying and wearing makeup in unprecedented numbers, driving a vibrant youth market. An astonishing 95% of US teenage girls were using some form of eye makeup by the mid-1960s, and even most of their mothers had joined on the trend. In short, makeup had become youthful, fashionable, and bold, and the industry, from London to New York, rushed to cater to this new demand. Chapter 3. The signature 60s look, all eyes on eyes. By the mid-1960s, a distinctive makeup style had emerged that defined the decade's look. The best way to describe it, the eyes became the star of the face. Almost overnight, the conventional beauty balance flipped. Instead of drawing attention to lips or rosy blush, women of the 1960s put nearly all the emphasis on making their eyes look bigger, brighter, and more defined. A contemporary phrase dubbed it the London look, or British look, essentially a pale, unmade-up face and lip with all the focus on the eyes. So let's break down the key elements of the iconic 1960s look, starting with what was new, eyeshadow and the crease. One hallmark of 1960s makeup was the strategic use of eyeshadow to reshape the eye. Women often applied light, pastel, or frosted eyeshadows on the eyelids. Colors like pale blue, icy mint, silver, white, or lilac were especially popular. On the flip side, a darker shade, mostly gray, black, or brown, would be used in the crease of the eyelid to create a sharp contour. In fact, many did not blend this darker color out, but rather applied it in a bold cut crease line that visibly defined the socket of the eye. This half-moon cut crease gave the illusion of deeper set, larger eyes. According to beauty historians, quote, women contoured their eyes to create a hooded, rounded effect. Often they would extend the crease line beyond the natural eye shape for a dramatic, almost cartoonish impact, truly making the eyes look like doll's eyes. I spoke about this a couple times before, but the 1960s had an overall fascination with a doll-like appearance. Young women wore baby doll dresses, Mary Janes, frilly socks, all pieces originally associated with dolls and children's clothes. But the 1960s were about the youth, and they wanted to wear what felt carefree and fun. Eyeliner was the 1960s woman's best friend. Black or dark eyeliner was typically applied in a thick line along the upper lash line, often winged with a little flick at the outer corner. This extended wing could be subtle or extremely pronounced, depending on the look one was going for. Everything from a small cat eye flick to a sweeping stroke towards the temple for a more Cleopatra-esque appearance was fair game. Thick mascara and heavy eyeliner defined the 60s look, and many women also lined their lower lash line or waterline in black for added intensity. A popular trick to enhance the wide-eyed look was to use white or nude eyeliner on the lower waterline. This made the whites of the eyes appear larger. In some cases, women even drew fake crease lines with eyeliner above the real crease for a graphic effect, an extreme mod style seen in high fashion editorials. Graphic liner shapes, double wings, spiderweb inspirations, and all that jazz became a playground for creativity. Cosmetic companies picked up on this, releasing liquid and cake eyeliners that promised precise lines. By 1967, for instance, Elizabeth Arden's beauty designer, a man simply known as Pablo, was showcasing avant-garde liner designs as literal eye art, painting elaborate patterns around models' eyes. And then, of course, there were lashes. Lots of lashes. If one accessory could define 1960s makeup, it would probably be false eyelashes. Never before had false eyelashes been so mainstream and so exaggerated. Women glued on strip eyelashes to their upper lash line to achieve that fluttery, doe-eyed look. And they didn't stop at one pair. Layering multiple sets of false eyelashes was not uncommon for maximum impact. Twiggy famously stacked 2 or even 3 pairs of fake eyelashes onto her lids to get her signature look. Mascara also improved in formulation and packaging during this era. The first mass-marketed mascara wand in a tube had been introduced in 1957, replacing the old cake mascara, so women were piling on mascara as well. Not only did the top lashes get love, the lower lashes were emphasized too. Many women applied false lashes to the bottom as well, or drew on lower lashes with liquid liner to mimic the spiky effect. Again, Twiggy's painted lower lashes are a famous example of this trend. The result was an ultra-fringed, almost spidery lash look that made the eyes impossible to ignore. One Harper's Bazaar interview with Twiggy herself revealed just how much effort this required. It would take me 1.5 hours to apply, including 3 pairs of false eyelashes. My bottom lashes, or Twiggy lines, were the work of a block of pigment that I applied with a paintbrush. That's right, the ultimate 60s it girl spent up to 90 minutes on her eye makeup, literally painting lashes onto her face. This dedication paid off, as those spiky upper and lower lashes became the defining image of 1960s mod style. Interestingly, eyebrows in the 1960s took on a more natural turn compared to prior decades. The ultra-thin eyebrows of the late 1930s and the sharply arched, penciled brows of the 1950s both fell out of favor. Instead, women either kept their brows naturally full or lightly tweezed for a moderate shape. Quote, "Tweezing down to a fine line is out," declared one beauty writer in 1965. Instead, brows were often brushed and filled softly with a pencil or powder to look youthful and soft, framing but not stealing the focus from the eyes. This softer brow helped further emphasize the eyes, whereas a bolder brow might have competed for attention. To complement the heavy eye makeup, the rest of the face was made intentionally pale and subdued. Foundation, dubbed pancake makeup, was applied to create a matte, flawless base. In many cases, women chose a foundation shade slightly lighter than their natural skin tone to get that pale, doll-like complexion, sometimes even a porcelain, almost white effect. One guide noted that some avant-garde types even liked a matte white face base for the mod look. Blush was used sparingly. Instead of a strong rouge on the apples of the cheeks, as in the 1940s, either a light pink or brownish or muted toned blusher might be swept high on the cheekbones to accent the eye area, without looking like obvious blush. The goal was a contoured but not overtly rosy face, keeping with the trend of looking almost like a living doll. Lips in the 1960s were a radical departure from the juicy reds of the previous years. The new trend was pale lips, often nude, peachy, or light pink tones, frequently seen with a frosted or glossy finish. By making the lips so close to the skin tone, attention stayed on the eyes. In fact, many women went so far as to blank out their lips with concealer or foundation before applying a light lipstick. Twiggy again exemplified this. Quote, "I never wore lipstick," she said of her mod days. "I used to put pan stick, a very thick stick of foundation, and I used to blot that on my lips." The result was a muted, beigey pout with maybe the slightest hint of pink, essentially removing the lip's natural color. Some popular lipstick shades were called things like Barely There or Nude Frost, indicating just how understated the lip was meant to be. Pastel tones like pale coral or frosty pink were also en vogue. Notably, British brands even put on a white opaque lipstick in the late 1960s for their truly blank matte lip. The pout wasn't meant to draw attention. Sometimes a clear gloss might be added for a little bit of extra shine, because the 1960s lip wasn't so much about mattifying, but more about taking away the color. To summarize, the classic 1960s matte makeup formula was essentially big eyes plus pale lips. A contemporary description from Beauty Bay puts it succinctly. Eye makeup, especially thick mascara and heavy eyeliner, defined the 1960s look. Pale blue and especially white eyeshadow was popular. Lower lashes were emphasized and defined, and women contoured their eyes to create a hooded, rounded effect. In other words, drama on the eyes, minimalism on the rest of the face. This was a complete inversion of the 1940s and 50s style, and it felt fresh, rebellious, and young, perfectly in tune with the spirit of the decade. It's important to note that within this overreaching trend, there were variations and substyles. Not every woman walked around with spider legs, lashes, and neon frosted eyeshadow every day. It was a spectrum from everyday matte to high fashion avant-garde. A typical young woman in, let's say, 1966 might wear a simplified version of the matte makeup for daytime. A sweep of light brown shadow in the crease, maybe a pale shimmery beige on the lid, a tidy line of eyeliner shaped in a smaller wing, mascara, sometimes 2 coats, and a pinky nude lipstick. False lashes might be saved for evenings or weekends. This gave a doe-eyed but not overly theatrical appearance, suitable for school or work and yet still very much on trend. For parties, concerts, or for those deep in the trendy London scene, the makeup could be pushed to extremes to create what we now largely refer to as 1960s makeup. Multiple false eyelashes, drawn-on lashes below, bold graphic eyeshadow, even decorative touches like little stars or flower stickers near the eyes. Colors could be more daring at night, a wash of turquoise or hot pink on the lids or glitter on the lash line. Magazines started to show off fantastical creations by makeup artists, for example, Elizabeth Arden's Pablo's. I mentioned him earlier, but Pablo really was the man behind the exaggerated 1960s makeup look. He created editorial looks with painted flowers on eyelids, mosaic of rhinestones, sometimes up to 300 crystals, which were individually glued in place, and even tiny false floral petals applied around the eyes. He treated the eye area as a canvas, spending hours to achieve these artworks. Eyes like these take Pablo as much as 5 hours to do, one article noted, describing them as, quote, more inspirational than wearable. The idea was to inspire women to be more adventurous. Pablo, quote, hoped these looks would encourage women to break their own brushes with wide-eyed abandonment. And indeed, everyday women did start to experiment, even if not quite at that extreme. So yes, all those exaggerated 1960s makeup looks you now see on people who recreate 1960s makeup looks are actually accurate, even though they don't represent what the everyday women of the 1960s wore on a daily basis. It's a more editorial, high-fashion approach to 1960s makeup, which honestly makes sense. Think about the makeup you now see in magazines, movies, or on stars. I would argue that a lot of it isn't what the normal day-to-day person wears on a regular basis. If you want to see the kind of makeup that everyday regular women did in the 1960s, I cannot encourage you enough to look at street footage, street photography, All of that. Maybe even look at pictures of your own family, because that will give you a much clearer representation of what most people actually did for their makeup in the 1960s. But yet in these pictures you can see that a lot of the inspiration was taken from those high fashion 1960s makeup looks. And if you look at these pictures or footage, you will see that while these women certainly drew inspiration from the high fashion makeup of the 1960s, they definitely wore a more lighter, natural makeup look. It's also worth noting that not all fashionable makeup of the 1960s was mod-inspired makeup. Some celebrities and women kept a more classic look but updated it slightly. For instance, French actress Brigitte Bardot spotted a heavy black cat eyeliner and smoky shadow, often paired with a more traditional, fluttery, not spiky lash look and a soft pout. A look that was sexy and smoky, bridging 1950s bombshell and 60s mod. Sophia Loren, likewise, wore exaggerated cat eyeliner and even drew on extra lashes. She would pencil small lines below her lower lash lines, kind of similar to Twiggy's trick actually, but kept her look more smoldering and mature. These looks coexisted with the youthful, doll-like mod face. In the US, actresses like Elizabeth Taylor and Barbra Streisand, especially in her late 1960s Vogue shoots, embraced a very dramatic eye makeup while still maintaining the elegance expected of a Hollywood star at the time. So while the London look dominated youth culture, the overreaching theme everywhere was eyes became the focus, whether done in a girlish mod way or a more sultry, dramatic way. As one journalist observed in 1967, quote, 20 years ago, a face was all mouth. Today, it's all eye. The switch has taken a generation, but the changeover is total. To truly visualize the quintessential 1960s mod makeup, consider Twiggy, the teenage model who became the face of the 1960s. With her cropped pixie haircut, huge painted eyes, and wispy figure, Twiggy appeared on magazine covers worldwide and inspired countless girls to copy her style. Her look encapsulated everything: enormous drawn-on eyelashes, top and bottom, a dark crease line that almost looks like a second set of eyes on her lid, bold liner, and barely their lips. Looking at her photos, one Vogue writer famously remarked, "Her face might have been conceived by a computer to match the requirements of a face of the 60s. In other words, Twiggy's big-eyed, youthful face was the 1960s ideal. And she wasn't alone. Models like Jean Shrimpton, Penelope Tree, Verushka, and actress Peggy Moffat, known for her sharp, 5-point haircut and geometric makeup, all embodied variants of this look in magazines and films. By the late 1960s, walking down a city street meant seeing plenty of women sporting at least a touch of this trend. Maybe a student with long straight hair wearing thick mascara and pale lipstick, or a secretary with a tasteful mini dress, subtle blue eyeshadow, and a bit of a cat eye. Makeup counters sold out of false lashes and frosty eyeshadows. Even older women eventually adapted, perhaps toning it down, but certainly lighter lip colors and a bit more eye definition became the norm for all ages compared to the decade prior. What started as a youth statement became a broadly embraced fashion. The effect was so pronounced that a 1966 article noted, "The sale of products for beautifying the eye had leaped several-fold," and commented with some amazement that unlike their mothers, young girls had, quote, "no qualms about the eye makeup being theatrical," and indeed, even their mothers were now getting in on bold eye looks. In short, the signature 60s makeup style turned women's faces into a kind of living doll or pop art statement. It was creative, fun, and completely different from the restrained beauty of the previous generation. And thanks to mass media and swinging icons, this look spread rapidly from London to America to the rest of the world. Truly a global trend by the end of the decade. Chapter 4. Icons. The faces who defined 1960s makeup. Every era of fashion has its muses and icons, individuals whose style captures the zeitgeist and influences millions. In the late 1960s, many such figures emerged, but a few stand out for making 1960s makeup as popular and pervasive as it became. So here are some of the key people who popularized the makeup trends of the 60s and how they each contributed to the decade's distinctive beauty looks. It's obviously impossible to talk about 1960s makeup without spotlighting Twiggy, once hailed as the face of 1966 and the first true supermodel teen idol. Twiggy was just 16 years old when she rose to fame, but her impact on beauty was enormous. With her large blue doe eyes, boyish haircut, and wafer-thin figure, Twiggy became the embodiment of the mod look. She not only wore the era's trends, she innovated them. Quote, "What a lot of people don't know is that I invented it, the look at the tender age of 16, pre-modeling," Twiggy said, describing how as a schoolgirl she developed her own unique way of doing makeup. She famously applied her makeup herself for shoots early in her career because it was her own style that photographers were trying to capture. Those painted-on lower lashes, widely referred to as Twiggy lashes, the triple-layered falsies on top, the bold crease and shadow, that was her creation. She even ditched lipstick entirely in favor of the pale pout trick, as mentioned earlier, using pan stick on her lips. Her look was so distinctive that it catapulted her to international stardom. She was on the cover of major magazines, appeared in newspapers, and had hordes of young fans copying everything, from her makeup to her clothes. Vogue described Twiggy as, quote, "a heroine for her time," and noted how universally recognizable she was. Everybody knows her name. Taxi drivers greet her by it, so do children in the park, and their nannies and grannies. The magazine observed of Twiggy's fame. In many ways, Twiggy's look set the template for 1960s makeup. When people think of the decade, they often picture her doll-like face. Her influence was amplified by her partnership with brands. By 1967, Twiggy was modeling for Yardley of London, fronting ads for products like Twiggy eyelashes, a false eyelash kit, and Twiggy paint, eye cosmetic. Using Twiggy's name and likeness, Yardley and other companies brought the London mod look to cosmetic counters worldwide. Twiggy perfectly matched what the era wanted: youth, novelty, and a bit of audacity. Across the Atlantic in New York, another 60s style icon was making waves with a very different but equally influential look. Edie Sedgwick was a socialite turned model who became the muse of artist Andy Warhol. Where Twiggy was sweet mod London, Edie was edgy bohemian New York. Edie's makeup was actually quite similar in principle. She too emphasized big eyes and kept her hair light and short, but her look was more underground and artistic. Edie was often seen with heavy, smoky eye makeup, large false lashes, and pale lips, combined with statement accessories like huge chandelier earrings and short mod mini dresses or leotards. She frequently lined her eyes in dark kohl all the way around for a raccoon eye effect, smudged shadow for a sultry look, and favored pale, almost white lipstick. If Twiggy was the poster child of mod innocence, Edie represented mod rebellion and the darker side of the 1960s glamour. She was dubbed an it girl and youthquaker by Vogue in 1965, showing that mainstream media was also captivated by her style. Some even credit Edie as the true originator of the Twiggy style makeup. In New York circles, she was already sporting exaggerated lashes and bold eyes in 1965, potentially influencing the wider trend. Regardless of who inspired whom, Edie Sedgwick became a cult figure. Young women who were drawn to the counterculture looked to Edie's example when piling on liner and donning giant earrings for a night out. Her tragic early death in 1971 only cemented her legend, but her factory girl look remains emblematic of the 60s mod meets bohemian style. Twiggy and Edie might have been the extremes, but many famous women of the decade helped popularize aspects of 1960s makeup. Jean Shrimpton, one of the first supermodels, was known for her doe-eyed glaze and chic mod fashion. She wore the big lashes and liner, although in a more softer and natural way than Twiggy did, and as a top model, often dubbed the Shrimp, she influenced everyday makeup through her countless magazine covers. Brigitte Bardot was, as mentioned earlier, not quite a part of the swinging London scene, but this French actress's smoky cat eye look, often paired with nude lips and tousled blonde hair, became internationally famous and wildly imitated. Her eye makeup was sexy and heavy, which dovetailed with the general focus on the eyes during the 1960s. Sophia Loren in Italy likewise wore exaggerated cat eye eyeliner and truly helped popularize the Mediterranean version of this trend, sometimes even sporting false lashes on her bottom lids for photos. Audrey Hepburn, who had helped redefine winged eyeliner in the 1950s, continued to influence the 1960s. Her role in Breakfast at Tiffany's in 1961 with that iconic thick eyeliner flick and modish little black dress bridged the gap between classic and new. Women who wanted a touch of 60s flair but in an elegant way would copy Audrey's liner and keep the rest of the face understated. British pop singer Dusty Springfield also immediately comes to mind when speaking about 1960s makeup. She adopted a striking makeup style with her platinum blonde bouffant hairstyle, heavy black eyeshadow and liner forming almost a cut crease and big lashes. Essentially a musical incarnation of the Maude look. Dusty's eye look was so pronounced that it became part of her showbiz persona, often with pastel blue eyeshadow on the lid and a dramatic arc in the crease, plus the classic spidery lashes. Similarly, the Ronettes wore thick, heavy eyeliner and layered falsies. Their rock and roll version of the trend helped bring 1960s youth culture into music in America. And let's not forget about Cher. In the mid-1960s, a young Cher was appearing on TV with her husband Sonny, sporting long, center-parted hair and heavily made-up eyes. She often wore cut crease eyeliner and outrageously full lashes, an American echo of the Maude style that millions saw every week on the Sonny and Cher show. Each of these women, in different arenas, film, fashion, and music, contributed to making the dramatic eye-focused makeup desirable for the masses. While faces in the spotlight showed off the looks, behind-the-scenes innovators also deserve credit for shaping 1960s makeup. For example, celebrated makeup artist Vidal Sassoon, who was definitely better known for his haircuts, but he also did collaborate on crafting overall looks, though more directly artists like Way Bandy and Kevin Aucoin would rise later. In the 60s, one notable figure was Barbara Hulanicki, the founder of Biba, a fashion boutique turned brand in London, who along with designer Mary Quant recognized the need for makeup tailored to the new youth styles. Barbara recalled how limited cosmetics were initially. Quote, "At the time you could get nothing, no foundation with any different undertones except yellow, no colors for dark or black skin tones at all. We wanted bright colors, pastel colors, colors that pop, magentas and blues." She ended up launching a makeup line at Biba in 1970 that offered an unprecedented range of colors and even marketed makeup to men and people of color, which was completely new and revolutionary. Before Biba's line, Mary Quant had paved the way in 1966 with her own cosmetic line, which I'll go more into detail in a second, but Mary can also be seen as an icon herself, not for always wearing the looks, because she definitely also wore more natural makeup looks, but for enabling millions of others to achieve them with new products. And of course, there were the creative visionaries like Pablo of Elizabeth Arden, who treated makeup application as art and wowed the public with his images of extravagant designs, inspiring many amateurs to experiment. Even Max Factor's team, with their advertising flair, contributed to the idea of makeup as an expression of the mood. One vintage Max Factor ad series in the 1960s described eye makeup looks as if they spoke. Sometimes soft and dreamy, sometimes bold and bright. That's why Max Factor's eye makeup range is mood blended in lots and lots of different tones, so your eyes and their makeup can always talk the same language, telling the way you feel. This marketing language, eyes that talk in color, shows how makeup was being framed as a tool of personal expression, even emotion. It wasn't just about looking pretty anymore, it was about making a statement. Through these icons, whether models like Twiggy, socialites like Edie, celebrities like Brigitte Bardot and Cher, or innovators like Mary Quant and Barbara Hulanicki, 1960s makeup looks spread and evolved. Each played a part in popularizing different facets. Twiggy made the doll-like Maude girl look aspirational. Edie embodied the artsy downtown vibe. The media often took note of these trendsetters. These women weren't just pretty faces, they were symbols of a cultural shift. I think it is also worth noting who mainly wore these makeup looks. The strong eye focus look was initially the domain of teenagers and young women. In the early 1960s, it was especially common alongside those aged roughly 15 to 25. That is the same youth demographic that was driving music and fashion revolutions. High school girls, college students, boutique shop girls, fashion models, pop singers, this cohort embraced the look enthusiastically. As the trend gained acceptance, it filtered upwards into the older age groups as well. By the late 1960s, you might find a 35 or 40-year-old woman incorporating mod elements, say swapping her usual red lipstick for a paler or softer nude, or adding a bit more makeup to her eyes than she did in the 1950s. Even conservative dressers eventually adopted the lighter lip combos and a touch of blue eyeshadow because that simply became the fashion of the time. Still, the full extreme look, think false bottom lashes and bold and bright colors, remained primarily a youth statement. Chapter 5: Game-Changing Brands and Products, the Business of 1960s Beauty. The 1960s weren't just transformative years for how women did their makeup. The decade also shook up which products they use, how they bought them, and who made them. A flurry of new cosmetic brands, product innovations, and marketing strategies hit the scene, many aimed squarely at the young, trend-conscious consumer. And with that, the beauty business itself evolved to keep pace with the swinging times. Fashion designer Mary Quant, famous for popularizing the miniskirt, perceived early on that the new style of clothes demanded a new style of face. In her own words, quote, "Now that the clothes were different, the face was all wrong." Mary noticed that the available makeup in the early 1960s was still the same stuff women had been using in the 1950s. Staid colors, fancy gold and enamel packaging, sold behind department store counters by ladies with white gloves. This wasn't going to fly with the hip youth crowd. So she dove into the makeup world headfirst herself and launched Mary Quant Cosmetics in 1966. This line was as revolutionary as her clothing. Funky nail polishes and lipstick shades like mustard yellow and prune purple, putty beige with a green tint, and pure white. Quote, "I brought in those colors to the nail polish. Nobody had ever seen nail polish in colors like that. And lipstick and eyeshadows," she recalled. All her products were designed to coordinate with the fashion she made. It was perfect. You could go into a Mary Quant store, buy a mini skirt, a top, and a matching eyeshadow and nail polish all at once. And to be honest, her concept truly took off. Mary's makeup also broke the mold in packaging and marketing. She rejected the ornate, grandmotherly compacts of the past. She loved plastic, 100-carat gold plastic, as she put it, for being honest and modern. For example, her lipsticks came in sleek, brushed metal tubes that looked more like a cool gadget than a dainty accessory, deliberately designed, quote, "so you could pull it out of your bag without it looking as though it belonged into a boudoir." Her brand's logo was a simple black daisy, a symbol of youth and fun, and that daisy appeared on all of her packaging, and even as a cute stamp drawn by beauty advisors at the corner of customers' eyes during promotions. Product names were cheeky and straightforward. A nude foundation was called Starkers, which is British slang for naked. A pale-face powder was ironically named Mistress. Lipsticks had names like Putty or Peachy. Blushes were Cheeky and Blush Baby. And eyeshadows were dubbed Jeepers Peepers. The branding had a sense of humor and modernity that appealed to young consumers. Mary Quant didn't just sell products, she sold a concept that makeup could be easy and fun and part of a total look. She famously marketed the London look worldwide, which was essentially the combination of the pale face and big eyes look that I spoke about earlier. One journalist in 1981 described this Quant-inspired face as a, quote, "pale, unmade-up look on the face and lips with all the focus on the eyes," calling it the British or London look. And that soon spread across the world. And Mary's launch events were just as innovative as her makeup. In 1966, she debuted her cosmetics with a theatrical flair, even converting a London double-decker bus into a rowing beauty clinic, the Mary Quant Beauty Bus. which toured around giving makeovers and demos to the public. This kind of pop art youth-focused marketing was groundbreaking at the time and helped cement her and her brand as the go-to for mod girls. And then there was Yardley of London, an old brand that stepped into the spotlight with new tricks. Yardley was a venerable British cosmetics and perfume house dating back to the 18th century, known for its lavender soaps, but it smartly reinvented itself in the 1960s to ride the trendy wave. Yardley's slogan became the London look, and they aggressively courted the youth market by signing Twiggy as the face of their cosmetics in 1967. Suddenly, this heritage brand was producing mod makeup ads splashed with Union Jack colors and hip swag. As mentioned earlier, they started to collaborate with Twiggy, and those products were big hits. One popular Yardley product was called the Potto Gloss, a small pot of lip gloss that came in fruity flavors, something that felt fun and different from traditional lipstick. They also had slicker lipsticks. The whole slicker campaign of Yardley in the late 60s was a huge thing, which were aimed at a younger crowd with an easy glide texture and fashionable colors. Yardley's advertising was full of energy and fantasy. One iconic ad campaign featured the tagline, "She couldn't fix a proper cup of tea, but he loved her madly because of her English eyes." Yardley basically told the world, if you want that swinging Carnaby Street look, we have the makeup to do it. And with Twiggy front and center, their message resonated globally. Yardley's success in the 1960s showed that even established companies had to adapt. They kept their elegant image, but injected a heavy dose of youthful appeal to stay relevant, and it worked. In the US, major cosmetic firms also embraced 1960s trends, though sometimes a bit more cautiously than the British upstarts. Max Factor, known as the makeup for movie stars since Hollywood's golden age, launched new lines of eyeshadows, eyeliners, and matte pale foundations to cater to the mod look. They ran ads highlighting the explosion of colors available. As mentioned earlier, Max Factor ads talked about mood-blended eye makeup in a rainbow of tones, inviting women to buy multiple bright shades to express different moods, a clear shift from the one-and-done conservative palettes of the past. Max Factor's Pretty Casual line, in 1968 for instance, was marketed with images of young models wearing pastel lids and natural lips. Revlon, another giant, took a slightly different approach by incorporating mod colors into their famously chic ad campaigns. Revlon had already pioneered creative color names in the 1950s, like cherries in the snow lipstick. In the 60s, they added shades like frosty white lipstick and nail enamel named Deadly Nightshade or Moonlit Lilac. In 1967, Revlon even launched a fragrance and makeup collection called the London Look in America, showing how they capitalized on the Anglophilia of the time. They also put out television commercials for eye makeup with swinging music and quick cuts of models' eyes winking, a far cry from the demure ads of the previous decade. A notable American entry was CoverGirl, introduced by Noxzema in 1961. CoverGirl broke the mold by being sold in drugstores and supermarkets rather than high-end department stores, which made cosmetics more accessible and affordable to the masses. This availability was crucial for teenage girls who might not have the allowance or bravery to visit a fancy beauty counter, but could pick up mascara at a local pharmacy. CoverGirl initially launched with just a medicated face powder and foundation, hence the idea of a fresh Noxzema skin look, but as the 60s progressed, they expanded into color cosmetics. They kept the range of shades limited, focusing on a few key trendy colors, which actually helped young shoppers not feel overwhelmed and also ensured products sold out, keeping the inventory fresh and always ready. Their strategy succeeded. By the late 1960s and going into the 1970s, CoverGirl was booming and known for its clean, fresh, all-American girl image. They often used wholesome fashion models like Cheryl Tiegs in their ads. It was a slightly more conservative take on 1960s beauty, but still distinctly lighter and more youth-driven than the previous eras. CoverGirl's rise also symbolized a democratization of makeup. No longer was makeup a luxury item for special occasions. Makeup was now an everyday purchase for anyone, including teenagers on a budget. The decade saw new cosmetic innovation that facilitated the new looks. A big one was the improvement and popularization of mascara. I touched on this earlier, and the main difference was that mascara was now sold in tubes, kind of like the way that it is still sold today, which made it a lot more affordable, quicker to apply, and easy to be thrown in a purse and always have on hand. What I found particularly interesting was that for a long time before the 1960s, makeup had been the same for so many decades, and by the 1960s, people were ready to work on some new products and formulas. Companies released new formulas, like for example the Ultra Lash Mascara, waterproof visions, which back then were marketed as tear-proof, like Mary Quant's 1967 Cry Baby Mascara, and colored mascara. Some offered blue in addition to the classic black and brown. False eyelashes themselves became a mass-marketed item. In the 1960s, you could buy them at 5 and dime stores, not just theatrical supply stores. There were even false bottom lash sets and individual flare lashes for custom application. And the way eyeshadows were sold changed too. Previously, most eyeshadows came in single pots in mostly subdued colors. Now, sets of frosted, high pigmented shadows in crazy colors were offered. Brands like Yardley and Max Factor sold palettes that included whites, turquoises, blues, and charcoal, encouraging women to play with more exotic and more adventurous combos. A vintage piece from 1965 described how shadows were used in Pousse Café layers, a reference to layered cocktails, meaning multiple hues were layered on one lid. The old rule of matching your eyeshadow to your eye color was thrown out. Now it was all about matching your eyeshadow to your outfit or mood, or not matching it to anything at all. Another interesting product category was foundation and generally face makeup, which was now tailored to the new look. Mary Quant's Starker's foundation aimed to give that sheer, nude effect. For general consumers, matte foundation and sheer pressed powders were marketed to help create the pale, velvety London complexion without the heavy cakiness. On the flip side, by the later 1960s, some brands started to introduce bronzer, which back then was often called sunshine makeup. I love that. I think it sounds so sweet and so much better than bronzer, by the way. The hippie movement made a natural glow and tan desirable, and brands were after that, a foreshadowing of 1970s trends. One of the most popular products was Rimmel's Sun Shimmer, which launched around 1970. But during the core mod years, bronzer definitely was less common. The chic look was still quite pale, unless you were naturally darker skinned, in which case the industry sadly only had a few products for you, until pioneers like Naomi Sims, who I spoke about in my Black Supermodels video, came out with her makeup line in the late 1960s, and Biba's line starting in 1970 addressed that gap. Lipstick of the 1960s also saw invention. The so-called frosted lipstick, which had pearlescent shimmer, was a big trend. Almost every brand had their own line of frosted or iridescent lip colors. Light pinks, peaches, even a silvery beige, which gave that opalescent, sheen, fashionable with the space age influence that was so sought after in the 1960s. Also, lip gloss came into its own in the 1960s. While lip gloss had existed earlier, it was this decade in which clear or lightly colored lip gloss became popular for that slick patent shine. Yardley's Eau de London and Mary Quant's lacquer-like lip finishes are perfect examples of this trend. By making the lips paler and shinier, they further receded to compare with the bold eyes. And nail polish is definitely worth a quick note too. While in the early 1960s, red nails were still the standard, as the decade wore on, nail colors diversified too. True mod girls might go with white or black nail polish, the latter anticipating the punk goth movement. But even in the 60s, a few edgier souls loved the look. Mary Quant offered unusual polish colors that matched her fashion palette. All of the sudden, mustard yellow was a huge trend, and she put it on nails as well. Generally, by the end of the 1960s, you start to see pastel nails and frosty nail shades, matching the makeup trends of the decade. Some cosmetic trends even tied into fragrances. For example, Yardley's Eau de London was a perfume marketed with a mod image, often placed alongside their makeup in ads. Revlon's Charlie from the early 70s would later combine an image of an empowered young woman with a fragrance and makeup line. The 60s laid the groundwork for this integrated marketing. The way makeup was marketed in the 1960s was radically youthful. Brands sponsored TV specials, like for example some of the first color TV broadcasts for fashion shows, and they used popular models and even celebrities in ads like model Jean Shrimpton for Revlon's The Lively look, actress Catherine Deneuve for Yardley in 1968, and many more. Notably, African American women started to be featured in cosmetic ads as well towards the late 1960s, reflecting the Black is Beautiful movement and the recognition of a broader market. For instance, model Donyale Luna, the first Black model on a Vogue cover in 1966, appeared in advertisements and beauty spreads. A 1960s Business Insider retrospective mentions actress Diane Carroll in 1967 wearing a bold eye look, highlighting that the trend crossed racial lines too, though makeup companies were slow to provide shade ranges for darker skin, which would finally improve by the 1970s. The 1960s saw venerable brands rebrand themselves for youth, new players change how makeup was sold, designers add cosmetic to complete their fashion vision, and an explosion of product innovation. Cosmetics were no longer a niche or purely functional item, they became fashion accessories in their own right. By the end of the decade, a woman could walk into a store and find an array of playful options. False lashes in various styles, eyeshadow duos that promised dreamy or wild eyes, nail polish that matched her mauve dress, foundation that gave a natural glow instead of a mask, and lipstick in previously unthinkable shades like pale frost or even green. Yes, some experimental lines like Tangy put out green lipstick that turned pink on the lips, a gimmick that actually sold. And the business numbers surely reflected this boom. Cosmetic sales rose significantly through the 1960s. Makeup wasn't just for special occasions anymore. It was part of the daily attire for the new woman. And most importantly, it was marketed as fun. Gone were the lectures about poise and elegance. Quote, 60s makeup ads used words like free, now, happening, and swinging, mod, and all of these words that were so on trend. The marketing revolution in beauty left a legacy that cosmetics are part of pop culture and youth culture, not merely a mother's routine before dinner parties. Chapter 6, Beyond Mod, Evolving Styles in the Late 1960s. While the mod look and its variations dominated the middle years of the decade, the late 1960s began to introduce new stylistic directions in makeup, influenced by a broader cultural shift. Fashion and beauty in 1968 and 1969 moved away from the strict mod stylization towards either a more eclectic or a more natural makeup look, setting the stage for the 1970s. With the 1967 Summer of Love and the rise of the counterculture movement, many young people embraced values of natural living, freedom, and rejecting materialism. In terms of style, this translated to a more natural appearance, a reaction against the very artificial lashes and painted face of mod fashion. By 1967, a number of trend-setting women, especially those involved in the hippie scene, folk music, or nascent feminist movement, opted to wear little to no makeup. The idea was a back-to-nature beauty, healthy, glowing skin, minimal foundation, maybe a dab of lip balm instead of lipstick, and certainly far less eye makeup. Actresses and singers like Ally McGraw or Joni Mitchell sometimes appeared nearly barefaced, emphasizing their natural features. The look often included long, unstyled hair and perhaps a flower tucked behind the ear, the original flower children. That said, natural in hippie terms didn't always mean plain. Sometimes it meant creative in a non-conventional way. For example, at music festivals or gatherings, hippie gals might decorate their faces with a little painted flower on their cheek, or a tiny star sticker, or henna-inspired patterns on their hands. A different kind of makeup art, more aligned with the psychedelic art and the Age of Aquarius spirit. The emphasis was on personal expression rather than mainstream fashion dictates. Cosmetics companies took note of this trend too. By 1970, you start to see marketing pivot to the natural look, which ironically sometimes meant selling products like bronzers, nude-toned lipsticks, and earth-toned eyeshadows to simulate a no-makeup glow. Indeed, things were pared back in the 70s, with a more neutral and bohemian look favored in line with the women's liberation and environmental movements. This shift was brewing in the late 1960s. Young women involved in protests or communal living had little interest in gluing on false lashes every day. Thus, while many stuck with their mascaras and matte minis, there was a visible contingent of youth that started wearing very light makeup by 1969, foreshadowing the fresh-faced 1970s aesthetic, at least until disco brought back the drama. On the flip side of natural, the late 1960s also sowed the seeds for more theatrical makeup subcultures. Artists like David Bowie, though his famous Ziggy Stardust looks didn't emerge until the 1970s, he was still experimenting with this in the 1960s. And bands like the Beatles in their psychedelic phase, like for example if you look at the face paint in the Magical Mystery Tour film, hinted at a more playful use of makeup by men and women alike. In 1968's countercultural musical Hair, performers of all genders donned body paint and expressive makeup on stage. This indicated a growing comfort with makeup as pure artistic expression, not just to look pretty, but to look interesting. Drag and gender-bending use of cosmetics also gained a bit more public awareness by the end of the decade. Like for example the cult film Pink Flamingos, which didn't come out until 1972, but its star Divine was developing his outrageous drag makeup style in the late 1960s underground scene. While these were not mainstream trends, they underscored how the 1960s broke the mold so much that by the decade's end, makeup was arguably more versatile than ever. One person could choose no makeup as a political statement, another could pile it on as an artistic one, and both choices were part of the 1960s tapestry. Despite all the talk of change, many women in the late 1960s still held on to a version of classic glamour, just a little updated. Socialites and Hollywood starlets, especially those a bit older, might tone down the wild mod elements, but still look fashionable. For instance, Jackie Kennedy in the late 1960s, after her White House years, adopted a simplified makeup, well-groomed natural brows, a subtle smoked-out liner, which was definitely less harsh than the mod black, usually finished with a soft peachy lip. Elegant and not overly trendy, yet more relaxed than the very polished looks of the early 1960s. Elizabeth Taylor, around 1967 and 1968, still rocked her lush false lashes and bold eyeliner, but she might pair it with modish pale lips or fashionable wigs, blending old Hollywood and new trends. Essentially, by 1969, the extremes had softened for many. The average woman might wear a moderate amount of eye makeup, maybe one pair of falsies instead of three, a little liner, some shadow, and a lighter lip shade, creating a happy medium between 50s and swinging 60s style. It's also notable that in 1968, at the Miss America pageant, feminist protesters infamously tossed instruments of female torture, as they referred to, into a freedom trash can, and these included lipsticks, hairspray, and false eyelashes. While the idea that they burned bras is mostly a myth, the symbolism of throwing away cosmetics was very real. This gesture showed that some women saw makeup as part of an oppressive beauty standard. The movement questioned, do women wear makeup to please themselves or because society demands a certain look? This conversation gained momentum at the decade's end. Some women indeed cut back on or stopped using makeup as a statement of liberation. Others held onto their mascaras, arguing one could be a feminist and still enjoy beauty routines. Either way, the late 1960s set off a dialogue about cosmetics that would carry on into the 1970s. The immediate impact was an increased acceptability of going barefaced. Choosing not to wear makeup became for some as much of a choice as wearing lots of it. This added another facet to the diverse looks of the era. The closing years of the 1960s expanded the makeup repertoire further, alongside the enduring mod aesthetic, which remained popular. In fact, in 1969, you still see plenty of big lashes and blue shadow in yearbooks and magazines. There arose these other currents: bohemian naturalism, early glam experimentation, and a minimalist, feminist-influenced approach. It's a testament to the decade's revolutionary spirit that, by 1970, a woman truly had options. She wasn't tied to the red lips and set hair of the 1950s. She could choose to be an earth goddess with chapstick and tan skin, a rock star with glitter on her cheeks, or a cool urban girl with mascara and pale lips, or switch between them as she pleased. As the calendar turned to 1970, the pendulum in mainstream fashion actually swung to a softer look. The 1970s would favor less is more for a time. Natural hair, tan skin, and minimal makeup were trendy by the mid-1970s. But interestingly, the 1960s mod makeup never truly died. It periodically comes back into style whenever a retro trend hits. For example, in the 1990s, there was a mini 1960s revival in fashion, and even in more recent years, designers and pop stars have sported graphic eyeliner and bold eyelashes in clear homage to the 1960s. Beauty editors still reference Twiggy's lower lashes or Edie Sedgwick's smoky eyes as inspiration for modern-day looks. There is something perennially charming about that wide-eyed creative makeup. It exudes youthfulness, daring, and nostalgia all at once. Conclusion: the lasting legacy of 1960s makeup. The 1960s didn't just change how makeup looked, it changed what makeup meant. What began as a flick of rebellion beneath a heavy lid became a quiet revolution across bathroom mirrors and boudoirs around the world. A decade that opened with propriety closed in wide-eyed abandon, and in between bloomed 1,000 ways to be beautiful or to reject beauty standards entirely. Suddenly, makeup wasn't about pleasing someone else. It wasn't about behaving, conforming, or disappearing. It became about becoming. A girl experimenting with pastel shadows in her bathroom, a model painting her lashes 3 times over, a woman in the crowd at Woodstock with flowers pressed into her skin and nothing at all on her face. The 1960s handed beauty back to the individual, not as a rulebook, but as a paint box. For the first time, the industry began to reflect this shift. No longer the territory of velvet counters and white-gloved sales ladies. Cosmetics spilled onto the high streets, the dance floors, the festival fields. A lipstick could cost pocket change, a mascara could be worn by a boy in a band. Brands adapted, colors exploded, and makeup slipped from its pedestal into real life. What had once been an accessory became a form of expression, and the modern beauty industry owes much of its spirit to this transformation. The decade's visual language still lingers in the culture. The bold liner and feathery lashes of Twiggy, the dreamy opacity of Yardley's pastels, the iconic doe-eyed stare of Edie Sedgwick beneath silvery bangs. These weren't just faces, they were icons, maps of a generation's mood. Even now, when eyeliner is drawn thick and graphic, or when a clear gloss catches the light just so, there's a whisper of the 1960s in it. A nod to a time when makeup dared to be fun, wild, and completely reimagined. The 60s never really left. They shimmer in thrifted compacts and vintage palettes, in magazine archives and memory. They live on in girls who draw lashes beneath their eyes, in women who learned from Mary Quant that makeup is meant to play, and in anyone who's ever stood in front of a mirror and made magic with their fingertips. Because beauty was never just about the surface. It was, and still is, a mirror, a mood, a language all its own, and the mirror still remembers. So that, my dear dolls and dreamers, is it for today's video. I feel like this was such a long video. The script was really long, but once I started researching, I couldn't stop. I fell so deeply in love with basically everything about the 1960s makeup so many years ago, but I've never really done the proper research in why these brands became popular, how makeup was so revolutionary in the 1960s, and it was truly great for me to finally take that time and take a deep look at what really defined and made 1960s makeup so uniquely beautiful. I feel like the 1960s might be the decade with the most memorable makeup. It is astonishing to me that all of this was born from the youth rebellion. As said, I'm always so fascinated by mod culture because it was something so entirely new. It came basically out of nowhere and it took over the world by storm. And so I really wanted to share all of this with you. As always, all of my sources are linked in the top comment on this video. I'm gonna pin you a comment with all the books that I read, all the articles that I read, all the documentaries I watched, because I did quite a bit of research for this video, and I know that you're always interested in seeing the sources, and it's great if there's a topic that you're specifically interested in, because you can just take a closer look at that. But yeah, that is it from me for this video. Now, if you're new on this channel or you didn't know yet, and now you're in love with 1960s makeup, I'm gonna link a couple of tutorials here for this look and several other looks. I love doing 1960s makeup, and if you want to learn, I'd be happy to teach you. I would love to know what you think of 1960s makeup. Which of these products are your favorites? Because I have such a hard time choosing. I wish I had some Yardley lipsticks because they look so great. I love the Yardley cellophane flowers, cellophane plastic campaign. That is great. I have some Mary Quant makeup, not from the 60s sadly, but they still make some of the products that they made back then, which is honestly pretty amazing. So I have some blush babies and some cheekies and all of that. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. It supports me, it supports the channel, and it would truly mean the world. If you're new here and you like what you saw, consider subscribing. I upload videos every single week all about the 1960s and 70s, the makeup, the fashion, the pop culture, the music, all of that, and I would love to have you around. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine. Take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls!